The galaxy had seen war before. Endless, calculated, and precise. Civilizations clashed not out of chaos, but out of logic. Battles were waged like equations, losses minimized, outcomes predicted. Entire species had risen and fallen following the same universal rule. When defeat became inevitable, surrender was the rational choice. It was not cowardice, it was intelligence. Across thousands of star systems, surrender was embedded into the very fabric of evolution. Creatures that knew when to yield survived longer. Those that resisted annihilation were simply erased from existence, their stubbornness becoming nothing more than a cautionary tale whispered in academic archives. So when humanity entered the galactic stage, no one expected anything different. At first, humans seemed unremarkable. Their planet, Earth, was categorized as a Class 3 death world, but that label alone wasn't enough to earn respect. Many species came from harsh environments. What mattered was not where you came from, but how you adapted to the wider galaxy. And humans seemed average at best. They had no natural weapons, no claws, no armor, no venom. Their technology, while creative, lagged behind established civilizations. Their political structures were fragmented, inefficient, and often self-destructive. They argued among themselves constantly, fought wars over ideology, territory, and resources. Their history was soaked in conflict, but also in contradiction. For every war, there were movements of peace. For every act of cruelty, there were stories of sacrifice. The Galactic Council observed them with mild curiosity, nothing more. Until the Verillian Empire decided to invade. The Verillians were ancient, precise, and unstoppable. Their fleets moved with mathematical perfection, their strategies optimized through millennia of conquest. They didn't wage war out of hatred, but necessity. Expansion was survival. Efficiency was law. When they set their sights on Earth, it wasn't personal. It was inevitable. Their first strike was devastating. Orbital defenses were wiped out within minutes. Satellites fell like burning stars across the atmosphere. Communication networks collapsed. Panic spread faster than any weapon. Human militaries mobilized, but it was clear from the beginning they were outmatched. The Verillians sent a transmission. It was simple, translated instantly into every human language. Surrender. Resistance will result in total extinction. Compliance ensures survival. Across the galaxy, this was the moment every war ended. Species surrendered. They always did. The Council watched, expecting the same outcome. Instead, humanity did something no one anticipated. They refused. At first, the Council assumed it was a misunderstanding, perhaps a translation error. Perhaps human leadership hadn't fully grasped the scale of the threat. But then came the response broadcast from Earth. A chaotic, uncoordinated flood of signals from countless sources. Governments, military leaders, civilians, all saying variations of the same thing. No. The Verillians paused. They'd encountered resistance before, but never irrational resistance. There was always a threshold, a moment when logic prevailed. This wasn't it. The invasion continued. Cities were targeted with surgical precision. Infrastructure dismantled, military installations erased. The Verillians avoided unnecessary destruction. They were not savages, but they applied pressure exactly where it would break a species' will. It should have worked. It always worked. But something was wrong. Humans did not break. They adapted. Within days, decentralized resistance networks formed. Without central command, local groups began operating independently. When communication failed, they improvised. When weapons ran out, they created new ones from whatever they could find. Civilians became soldiers. Engineers became tacticians. Ordinary people, farmers, teachers, mechanics, turned into something the galaxy had never seen before. Unpredictable. The Verillians noticed it first in their casualty reports. They were losing ships. Not in large numbers, but enough to matter. Human tactics made no sense. They attacked when defeat was certain. They sacrificed positions that had no strategic value. They fought battles they could possibly not win, and yet, somehow, they inflicted damage every time. A Virillian commander recorded an observation. They do not act to survive, they act to resist. The distinction was subtle, but it changed everything. Weeks turned into months. Earth was burning. Entire regions fell under Virillian control, yet none remained secure. Guerrilla attacks erupted constantly. Supply lines were disrupted. Occupied zones became death traps. The Virillians increased pressure. They deployed heavier weapons, stricter control measures. Another transmission was sent. Surrender. This conflict is no longer efficient. Your extinction probability exceeds 97%. Again, humanity responded. No. The Council began to pay attention. This was no longer a simple invasion. It was an anomaly. Why didn't humans surrender? The questions spread across the galaxy. Researchers analyzed human psychology. Historians dug through their past. Anthropologists studied their culture. The answer was complicated. Humans did not see surrender the same way. To most species, surrender was survival. To humans, surrender was something else entirely.
13.
It was the loss of identity, the loss of freedom, the loss of everything that made existence meaningful. There were countless examples in human history, moments where surrender would have saved lives, yet was rejected, not out of ignorance, but choice. A phrase kept appearing in their records: better to die standing than live kneeling. The galaxy didn't understand it, but the Virillians were beginning to. The war escalated. Human forces launched a counteroffensive. It was reckless, illogical, impossible. They targeted a Virillian orbital command ship, one of the most heavily defended assets in the fleet. By every known metric, the attack should have failed. And it did. Every human ship involved was destroyed. But not before one small vessel, damaged, barely functional, broke through the defensive perimeter. It shouldn't have been able to continue. Its engines were failing, its weapons depleted, yet it kept moving. Intercepted transmissions revealed something unexpected. There was no command structure left aboard, no coordinated plan, just a single pilot. When questioned later through recovered data logs, her final message was simple: if I stop, they win. The ship collided with the command vessel. The explosion was catastrophic. The Virillians lost one of their central coordination nodes. For the first time in their history, they experienced confusion. Not defeat, not fear, confusion. Why would a species throw away lives so freely? Why fight when the outcome was already decided? The answer began to emerge slowly, painfully, through observation. Humans didn't fight because they believed they would win. They fought because they believed they should. That belief was something the Virillians had never encountered. War, to them, was a tool. To humans, it was something deeper, something emotional, something personal. The turning point came unexpectedly. A Virillian ground force occupied a major human city. Resistance had been fierce, but ultimately unsuccessful. The city fell. Standard procedure dictated stabilization, integration, and eventual assimilation. But within days, resistance resumed. Not organized, not strategic, just constant. Small acts of defiance, sabotage, attacks, protests. Even children participated, disrupting operations in ways that made no tactical sense. A Virillian officer documented an encounter. I neutralized a human combatant, unarmed, injured, incapable of further resistance. Yet as I approached, it attempted to attack again. There was no possibility of success, no logical reason to continue. The report concluded with a single line: I do not understand them. The Virillian Empire began to fracture internally, not physically, but philosophically. Their entire understanding of war was being challenged. If an enemy could not be broken, could they ever be conquered? Losses continued to mount. Not catastrophic, but persistent, unavoidable. Humanity was not winning, but they were not losing either. They were enduring. And in that endurance, something remarkable happened. Other species began to notice. At first, it was curiosity, then inspiration. The idea spread quietly. What if surrender wasn't the only option? Small uprisings began in Virillian-controlled territories across the galaxy. Nothing major, nothing coordinated, but enough to matter. The Virillians found themselves fighting not one war, but many, all because of one species that refused to follow the rules. The final phase of the conflict came not with a decisive battle, but with a realization. The Virillians calculated the cost, time, resources, stability. The numbers no longer made sense. Victory was still possible, but it was no longer efficient. And for the first time in their history, efficiency was not enough. They sent one final transmission to Earth. Not a demand, not a threat, a question. Why do you continue? The response came from a human broadcast, a collage of voices, different languages, different tones, all unified by one idea. Because it's our home. There was no further explanation, none needed.